Hello, everyone. This is BroTalk. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode here. Today, we're going to talk about toxic mentalities, toxic mindsets. We're going to speak a little rundown, a little review on where toxic mindsets come from. And then my brother and I, we're going to talk about different types of toxic mindsets that a lot of people have today and why they have it and why it's so bad and how we can get out of it, guys. So please, guys, come join us. We would really appreciate it. Like this video, comment, share it. If you have any questions on something we said or we didn't clarify something, let us know down below. Please, please, please. We would really appreciate it. Come join us. Come listen to our conversation.
All right, so toxic mindsets. It's a
Yes.
very interesting topic because there are plenty. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure through your investigation, through my investigation, we were able to find many different types of mindsets that are toxic and that affect our daily life. Or we can see it in ourselves, or we can see it in others.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into these toxic mindsets, specifically each and one of them, or like break it down, narrow it down, right? We have to see, where do these toxic mindsets come from? Where do you think they
Mm-hmm.
come from?
I think they come from Latin women. Like
Oh,
las Latinas and all the.
oh,
I
that
actually
is a
brought with me
fact.
10. I brought some 10 chicks with me right here, and we're gonna interview them about their toxic mentalities. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding.
Interesting thing that you say that.
Why?
Us being Hispanic, we
Yes,
acknowledge that a lot of toxicity is in our culture.
especially yes. Sadly, that is very true. Sadly.
Yes, especially the women. But anyways, continue.
Yeah, it's not a good thing to have a toxic mindset. Guys, don't have a toxic mindset. It's not good. By the way, just FYI, if you like women that have toxic mentalities, guess what? You also have a toxic mentality as well.
You also are toxic. Yes, exactly.
Yes. Yes. Okay, but getting serious, where
Yes.
do toxic mentalities come from? Okay.
Hmm.
So I was doing some research and there was like different factors, right?
Okay.
Some of them was like environment, where you were raised as a child.
Right.
Some of them said trauma, right? Some of them said
Yeah.
based maybe based off some fear-based responses. I saw different answers on where can someone develop a toxic mindset. And then I even investigated just a little bit, not too much, of like why in the Hispanic community, for example, there's certain
Interesting. Okay.
toxic mentalities, which we could talk about a little bit. But so this is what I have. So for example, toxic mindsets, one of the biggest places is early conditioning and environment. Now, number one is from your childhood experiences. Now, a lot of the times when there's a dysfunctional family, right,
Hmm.
the dysfunctional family can put into the child's mind, instill in them unhealthy beliefs. And I wrote an example. For
Okay.
example, a child that is raised in a critical or neglectful environment might develop low self-esteem or perfectionism,
Hmm.
right? So, for example, if you have a mom or dad who's always calling their child estúpido, stupid, eres un estúpido hijo de la gran beep, you know, and like for everything, guess what?
Okay.
That kid is gonna grow up thinking I am stupid,
Yeah.
and
100%.
subconsciously, and they're gonna believe it, and they're always gonna doubt themselves. They're not gonna be confident, and when you're not confident, and when you doubt yourself, guess what? That translates to many areas of your life with women or with men, school, finding a career, going up to people. Like people think a toxic mentality is like a virus. It spreads. It's not just in one area. It spreads to different parts of your life, right? So that's like a basic, but that's where a lot of times the toxic mentality come from, and it's because the parents probably the in the society where they were raised also had a dysfunctional family, or
Hmm.
the external factors of where they were living was so strong it affected their parents, which gave them also a toxic mentality. And I would say another one
Okay.
is societal norms, as I mentioned. For example, I'm going to talk about the example of maybe the country of Brazil and Venezuela. What do I mean? So societal norms, there for example, a lot of Hispanic countries, and I mentioned those two in particular, is that there was studies that showed that a lot of women are constantly exposed to what is the ideal body, to an unrealistic societal standard. You know,
Yeah.
big boobs, skinny waist, big butt, right? And
Mhm,
every woman has to have that, right? So this body image that
mhm.
is promoted, guess what? Creates toxic beliefs as like the women are, they equate themselves like my self-worth is equal to what my body is, because in the society where they're at, they're saying to be a beautiful woman, you got to look like this. And if you don't look like this, you ugly, you're worthless. So you see where another way of how a toxic mindset can evolve from.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. That reminded me of, I just searched it up too right now. Body dysphoria, basically, right?
Mm,
It's a mental health condition where a person spends a lot of time worrying about their flaws and their appearance. And that, how can that be influenced? That could be influenced through societal standards, right?
yeah.
Oh, and I believe a lot of it, unfortunately, does come from social media, right? And what
Mm-hmm.
people see, and usually, you know, what people see is what they tend to believe, right? So if
Mm,
the rest of the world or around my environment is this is what they believe in, that I'm going to believe in it as well. And that can affect your mind, right? And then now
mm-hmm.
you have this mindset that it needs to be this way or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also like the first thing you mentioned, neglect, right? And all these
Yes.
childhood experiences that a kid can go through. And I one thing I found in common through my studying was that almost all these mindsets have to do with the way you're raised, right? And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it comes through neglect. What's neglect? Neglect is suffering uh, a lot of proper care, right? Is when you're in a deficiency of that, right?
Mm,
So suffering a lack of proper care. That's what it is. Sorry. Um, and what's an example that I can think of at the moment? Well, in school, you encounter sometimes, and I'm sure you encountered this, I so did as well, a lot of bullying,
mm-hmm.
right? Not that I necessarily got bullied, but sometimes we see it.
Mm-hmm.
And where do these bullies come from? Why do they act this way, right? Sometimes they think they're the biggest, toughest people, or they say they're probably the loudest in the room, and they try to bring other people down. But is it because they're being neglected at home? Is it because some type of trauma that's happening at home is being passed on to them, and like their way of escape is
Mm-hmm.
through, doing it to others? So um you also mentioned how parents could bring their trauma and pass it on to their kids. and
Correct.
and that's how I thought about the bullying part, because sometimes nowadays in school kids will bring in that bullying, but where does that come from? That most likely comes from the person that's raising them, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
a cause and effect chain, right? Just because this person did this to me, I'm going to do this to them, and then it just continues. It's a passed on trauma. It's a never ending chain, basically.
No, 100%. And we have to remember that the child or the children,
Hmm.
right, they start behaving this way because they're children. They don't know how to communicate as well as an adult. They don't know how to compartmentalize, let's say. They don't know how to really think things through, and they don't know why a lot of times they're doing something, right?
Hmm.
They just do it. They act out, they're violent or they're mean and so forth. But it's because they learn this behavior through the parents, or maybe even the environment where the parent has put them into. Like, for example, learned helplessness, for example, right? Where the person feels
Hmm.
like I don't have control over my life, like I can't get anything right. Like that mentality, like I don't have control, and like they let life just take over. They learned helplessness because they were raised, or they were in situations where a lot of the times they didn't have control. And
Hmm.
if you're raised in a situation again and again and again where you don't have control over what happens to you, you learn that. So same thing with the bullies, as you mentioned, they're learning it in different ways, and they don't know how to communicate,
Hmm.
or how to separate what's
Hmm.
happening at home and then what they do at school and so
Right.
forth, right? And then they might start building some cognitive distortions, or like their thinking patterns might not be so good now, or the way of logic is flawed because of the environment or childhood experiences they're going through. And then that creates something called a cognitive distortion, where now
Mhm.
the way you think about a situation is so flawed. It makes no logical sense, but you already raised like that. So it's kind of hard to go back. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You took the words out of my mouth. Basically, eventually these type of behaviors, this type of trauma that's being passed on to you will create a mindset. And
Yes.
now you have this erroneous, bad way of thinking where now you think you're right, and now you have a set mindset, which we could go into, right? And I think
Yeah.
one of the talking about bullying and the information we just displayed, it reminds me of the which one is it? It reminds me of actually two. It
To
reminds
what?
me of the second guessing mentality,
Okay.
and also the all or nothing. I've said all or nothing what mentality. Why?
Okay. Explain.
So second guess mentality is basically the uncertainty in decision making, right? And
Uh-huh.
usually this comes from a fear of failure, of making the wrong decision. It's basically a person that is an overthinker, has like a low self-esteem,
Mm-hmm.
and that could be based on past experiences, or an all or nothing because it's very linked to perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
which is viewing situations as black or white with no middle ground, and thinking a single mistake defines you or ruins everything, right? So usually when you develop that type of mentality, um, and you're set and firm because of the way you were raised or the trauma that was passed on to you, you could start thinking that everything in life is black or white.
Mm-hmm.
But we've acknowledged that life is very gray.
Yes.
So when you have that type of mentality and you happen to do a mistake, now you're like, because you're viewing life from black and white perspective, you're thinking that a single mistake is gonna ruin stuff. And when you think this a single mistake is gonna ruin you, now in the future, when you start to make decisions, you're gonna start to second guess them.
Mm.
You're gonna start to doubt yourself, and you're gonna start to question yourself. And if you're ever in a, especially if you're ever in like in a leadership position or leading a group or stuff like that, other people will start to doubt you because of you always constantly second guessing, right?
Uh-huh.
And basically it comes from a fear of failure, and I feel like a lot of I believe these two mentalities are linked in together, especially, and it comes from uh like the people that tend to put other people down type experiences.
And what would you say? I mean, I don't know if you if your research just came up, but maybe from or maybe someone else you've heard this from an athlete or a book or a video, whatever. If someone has this mindset of like second guessing or fear of failure, how do you stop having fear of failure? Because failure does suck, rejection does suck, but like, how do you get over that, or have you done that, or just I don't know. I'm just curious to hear about that.
I think one solution that I was able to look at actually for not only these but many other mentalities was the ability to focus on the things you can't control
Wait,
and
focus on the things that I cannot control.
that you can control.
Oh, okay, 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 okay.
Focus on the things you can control. Because the moment you start seeing life as black and white, and if we narrow down certain experiences, there are certain things you are not in control over or couldn't do anything about. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to kill yourself over a simple mistake that you had no way of going about it or had no way of going about it, then you're just going to fall into this mindset that it's like it's always my fault. And now I'm going to start second guessing. And now I'm going to start doubting every decision I make because now I'm scared to make a decision.
Uh-huh.
When in the first place, if we narrow it down, it had nothing to do with you, or you weren't in control of the situation. So if you can't acknowledge that you weren't in control or focus of the situation, then that's when these mentalities start to, hinder you in a sense.
Hmm.
And I believe that that would be one way to to get out of it. Not only these, but many mindsets.
And so then if the person, but then how does the person put themselves in a mindset of like, okay, let me just focus on things that I can control, right? And let's say they start doing that, but then they start second guessing themselves on things that they can control, right? So they're like, now they're like, okay, I'm only gonna focus on things that I can control, como like Aaron said. So
Hmm.
how do they get out of the fear, right? How do they get out of the fear of not making a mistake on things that they do control, right?
Hmm.
So how do they get rid of that? I don't know if you've heard like a documentary, an interview from an athlete or a star or a book or like I don't know, something in
Well,
basketball. I don't know. You tell me.
huh. Well, I believe it's about the journey, not the destination, right? And if we're
Uh-huh.
looking at the things that we can control, we have to acknowledge that without any, you cannot succeed without having any failure. There is no success without failure.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. It would that it's you really caught me there with
No,
that
no, because I
question.
mean, I wouldn't know what to tell them. I think it is a difficult question. I
I
wouldn't know
think
what
it's
to say either.
I think it's more of a, especially if it's a like a family member, it's more like sitting down with them, viewing specific things that are affecting them in their life and
Yeah.
narrowing it down to what can you control, what can you not control, and then maybe give your own personal experiences and things that helped you out based
Uh-huh.
on what they're going through. And I feel like that way you could eventually get them out of that type of mindset.
Interesting. Actually, let me make it a little bit more personal because I think if we make it more personal to you, well, you could tell us what was your thought process, and maybe
Okay.
that's more helpful. For example, how
Okay.
did you get into the mindset? I'm sorry. Let me re-say this. How
Yeah.
did you,
Hmm.
Aaron Vera, how did you get into the mindset of when it comes to money, right? This is a question about money. And I
Okay.
know that you're doing some big stuff. I don't want to ruin it yet to the audience, but I know you're doing some big stuff with like
We
policies
are.
and real estate and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, there's always risk in everything, and I don't have to explain that to you. You know
Yeah.
that, right? So when it comes to now that you're in this world of, you have policies, you put money to the policies, you're ready to start investing soon, and all that stuff, right? How did you, Aaron Vera, get over that hurdle? Yes, this is something that you can control. You like, I think you know that already, and if people were to hear this, they know that. How did
Yes.
you get over that risk? Like, okay, these are things I can control, but I can still mess it up, but I'm still gonna do it anyway. I obviously I know you want to be successful, but how did you overcome that mentality? Because I know that growing up, you weren't raised, you particularly with the whole finance mindset, money mindset, rich mindset. So how did you overcome that? Where you're like, I'm ready to do it no matter what the risk is, even if I have control over it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I was just trying to write things down before
Before
I
you
forget.
answer,
If I answer. Okay.
we know this is about to be good, guys. He's writing stuff down.
um, I believe in that type of circumstance, and I believe that applies to many. You have to be able to acknowledge, not only acknowledge, but live with the unknown,
Okay.
right? Because you don't know what's to come, right? And that's
Uh-huh.
the scary part. You can't see
Yes.
the future. You have to take a step, and you don't know if that piece of glass that you're stepping on is going to break or is going to, sustain you, right?
Mhm.
But I've also learned through life things will either make you or either break you. So I won't know if I don't try.
Can I
So
ask one thing, or do you want to finish first, based on
I was
what you
also
just said?
I
Go.
was just gonna I was just also gonna say
Hmm.
that also I think we've learned through life that there is no high reward if you don't have a high risk of things. Um,
Hmm.
you don't. What I forget the quote. It goes like, "You miss all the shots that you don't take."
You miss all the shots you don't take.
And you
Oh,
didn't even take it. So how does it mean that you missed? Well, guess
uh-huh.
what? You would have never known if you either made it or missed if you never took it. So
Correct.
technically, like you never took it, it's like you missed because you could have missed your chance. You could have missed your opportunity to become successful or to change yourself, right?
Hmm.
So you miss all the shots you don't take. I think that's like a Michael Jordan quote.
Interesting. So, how do you, Aaron Vera, live with the mentality of not knowing the known? Because you just said it's scary, and you're right. Once you can live with the unknown, you can do these things, and you can get out of this toxic mindset. So how did you come to the place mentally or physically, whatever, that hey, I'm okay with the result? How did you do it? I see what you're saying, but
Huh.
I feel like there's a little bit more with you. I don't know. I just feel it. I could be wrong.
I mean, if you feel something, take it out of me because I'm really trying to like.
No, no, but I want to know how you did it. I mean, you're giving me everything, but how did you do the jump from the known? Okay, I won here, but I want to get to the unknown. And I understand you got to take the shots that, or else it's like you miss them, which makes sense. But how did you do the jump mentally or physically? What did you do? What was the jump that made you be like, whatever the unknown is, I'm gonna take it? What
I
what
feel.
what was it? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. This
Yeah,
is
of
you.
course. I understand. I feel like I this is a very subjective thing because things in life will either make you or break you, like I said, and certain
Yes.
experiences in my life, I believe, is what made me, right?
Okay.
But before they made me, they broke me.
Okay.
And before I got to the point where it made me, I had to like put all the pieces together and realize like where I was in life and this is not where I wanted to be.
Mm.
And the only way, or one of the only ways to get out of it, was to make better decisions, choose the people you surround yourself very carefully. And I feel like that with mentors and getting comfortable being uncomfortable in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So behind all this risk, behind all this unknown, there could potentially be a reward. But if you're never ever going to teach yourself how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, then
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you'll be ready for the next step of reward. Because, for example, in my life, if I'm trying to save money or I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
be rich and I'm trying to invest and do all of this, then guess what? I can't buy all the things that I want. I can't go out all to the places I want. And that puts me in a situation where I could potentially be uncomfortable because it's the life I was used to. It's the life I like. I was with many friends. I was with many women. I had a high dopamine spike, but now I'm alone at home with no plans, nothing to do, just like four walls and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And in those moments that you're uncomfortable, you have to learn how to get comfortable with them. Therefore, sacrificing sacrificing temporary fun for a successful future rather than sacrificing a successful future for temporary fun.
Okay, got you.
Now, I don't know if I answered your question.
You answered everything else but my question. No, no, okay, no, no. I
I
definitely
don't know if you were
understand.
able
Yeah,
to
yeah.
read something out of me because you're very good at reading me.
It sounds like what you no, no. Everything you said was correct, and and obviously I know you a bit more than anyone else who's going to be watching us, but I feel like what you're saying, and this could be good or bad,
Okay.
is that depending on who the person is, what made you make the jump was trauma.
Yeah.
It was trauma. It really, and I have an idea of what parts of your life you're talking about.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So those parts of your life, it made you just the trauma made you look back and be like, yeah, this is not what I want. And then when you realize what you do want, you're like, okay, obviously if I want that, I got to do something. I can't just be
Well,
laying here.
well, because we've acknowledged that and correct me if I'm wrong, there's only two ways to change. It's either through trauma or you're a person that's continuously trying to change. Or am I
Yes,
missing one?
like actively trying to change. That's correct. Yes.
Actively trying to change. Other than that, after you reach a certain age, I believe it's almost like it's
Um,
very hard to change,
I think
especially if you,
yeah,
because it's not only about acknowledging it, it's about putting it into action. You know,
correct.
there's a difference in acknowledging something and actually changing, right?
Hmm.
Acknowledge is just the first step. So during that time in my life, I was very hard headed. I wasn't a person that was trying to change. And I'm a believer in God, but I feel like
Hmm.
God put me through a trauma to make me realize that He's gonna make something as hard as possible to be able to teach me a lesson. And that was the
Hmm.
mentality that I went in with afterwards, where like, you know what, I went through this for a reason, and I need God to like, in a sense, realign me back to
Hmm.
like where I want to be in life, in a sense, right? I believe that's like the best mod module to live by, in a sense,
Hmm.
that Gamza Latova, everything happens for a reason. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I first went through trauma, and then afterwards, I just continue to be a person that tries to seek for change or self improvement. And if you haven't gone through or you're not in one of those two categories, it's going to be very hard to change.
What I would say next is before we continue, and this is just a little thought experiment for you and for anyone who's listening, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
I'm not.
Could you say that maybe there was a percentage or a chance that you would not have been able to overcome this difficulty? And if that were the case, would could you say that if someone doesn't overcome the difficulty or the challenge that is thrown to them, can they get stuck with that toxic mindset? Like the ones that you're talking about, not the ones that I'm talking about, but the ones that you're talking about. I just think it's an interesting thought.
Could you no no? Could you just like repeat that question
Yeah.
if it was a question, so I could
That's
like,
that's the thing. I don't know if it's a question.
because I'm if it was, I'm trying to answer your question always, but I don't know if it was.
I think it's a scary thought. I think it's a scary. I don't know if it's
If
a.
you're not able to overcome
Okay, fine. How about
that,
this?
okay.
I'll say it as a question. Do you think, based on what you just said, there
Hmm.
was a percentage or a chance that these difficulties, and I feel like
Hmm.
one day you should talk about your difficulties and more specific in a podcast one day. Do you think that all these challenges that you mentioned that were thrown at you and is what made you make the jump, could have there been a chance where you were not going to overcome them at all? And if yes, could you say that you would have been stuck as a person with that toxic mindset?
Now I feel like I'm always gonna say no because I believe in myself, but I have to be realistic.
Okay.
And I don't believe I've gone through the worst. I don't believe I've gone through the least.
Easiest.
I've just gone through what I've gone through,
Definitely
right?
not easy, guys. I'll tell you that. I know his stuff. Definitely not easy. But
You've gone
continue.
through what you've gone through. And listen, I believe yeah, there's a chance that me and myself, anybody could get stuck. I don't believe that that's the end all
Uh-huh.
be all. Um but I believe you could get stuck. It just depends for what amount of time you get stuck.
Hmm.
Everyone is going to get stuck for a different amount of time. Some people might take 3 months, some people might take a year, some people might take a whole lifetime. So,
Hmm. And
and it just that all revolves also on the decisions you make, right? If you could you could do one thing right, right? But it goes hand in hand with another, right? Okay, you know what? I'm gonna stop going out and spending so much money, but I'm not seeking for mentors or people that help me grow in a
mm-hmm.
sense. Then yes, you've done great in one area, but guess what? For you to reach ultimate success, you must go to the next step too, right? Maybe some people accomplish 2 steps, but get to
Mm-hmm.
the final destination. Let's say it's 10 as an example. Some people reach 8, some people reach 5. There are multiple steps to get somewhere. And you could, you know, accomplish a few steps and feel great and feel in a sense you might feel fulfilled or like you've surpassed it, but you really haven't. And
Hmm.
you get comfortable at a certain step and you don't seek to, for more steps. So it's I don't know. I believe it's subjective but objective at the same time.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. Okay.
You have something to say, sir?
I disagree with everything you have to say, you
Nah.
ignorant. I'm just kidding. No, 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 no. That's no. I wanted to hear that. I wanted to hear that. I mean, to be fair, also the things you were saying made me think this way. So I was like, all right, let me go down this questioning.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
okay, interesting. Okay.
Don't worry. One day we'll get into specifics. But
Yeah,
I
yes,
but
yes. Not today, though. Not today.
not today, not today. But
Not today. Definitely not. No.
yeah, I think we got into a lot of things for the past 20 minutes.
No, but
So,
that's good. We wanted to
great. Yes, we did. And I do want to talk about a few others, but I do want to get to yours actually and what you were able to
find out.
study and your mindsets, and then I'll see if I can link mine to yours.
Okay. Should I mention both or just one of them?
Go for it. Just go for both. And if
So,
anything, I'll just
yeah,
chime
we'll
in.
see. Yeah, we'll see what happens. So the two that I took from, right? Um, right, it was actually from a famous book by Mark is it Manson or Mason? I forgot. It's actually a book he
Hmm.
bought me a couple like 2 years ago called The Subtle
Oh,
Art of Not Giving a Beep a fuck, right?
yes.
Basically, right? It's a great book. I read it 3 times already. Once before you bought it for me, and then 2 times once you bought it for me. And I
Hmm.
and I took again, there's different mindsets that he talks about because his whole book is how to live a better life, quote unquote, or like what's the counterintuitive approach to live a better life in the world we live in. And he talks about very common toxic mentalities that a lot of us have, right? And he actually
Okay.
does mention the victim mentality, people pleaser, uh, the failure, rejection, a fear of rejection, so forth.
Yeah.
But the one I want to talk about, which I for
Okay.
me was more interesting, what he writes and some other research I did is called. I wrote it down. I kind of changed it up a bit, but I wrote, I just want to find happiness paradox, right? I want to find happiness problem, right? That's like one of the most common questions that self
I've
help
heard.
books. You
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
heard of
yeah.
this, right?
I just heard lately a lot of people say, I'm just looking for happy. I'm looking to be happy. This and that. It's a very like self-centered type thing. Narcissist.
So interesting enough, you read the book, right? Or like you read the summary of it, or like some
Yeah.
like a year ago, right? Or something, right? So I think you remember that's actually one of his points. It's such a self-centered question.
Hmm.
Don't look at it like that. But before I get there, he basically says that this concept that we have of I want to find happiness in life, he says erase that question completely. You shouldn't ask yourself that question because people are like, I want to live happy and I don't want to suffer.
Yeah.
But he says suffering is going to happen. Life is a form of suffering. No matter what your situation, if you're rich, if you're poor, middle class, white, black, Hispanic, no matter what religion, and he has a chart, right? Like, and I wrote it down. The rich suffer because of their richness, the riches. The poor suffer because of their poverty. Those that don't have families suffer because they don't from loneliness or they don't have families. People who have big
Right.
families suffer because of their big families. So we're all suffering of something. We're all going to
Very
suffer
true.
something, right? So the list of suffering is just endless. So
Yeah.
what he talks about is that you should ask yourself, what am I willing to suffer for, right? He asks to find meaning. Our suffering has to find meaning, right? When suffering has a purpose, it becomes bearable and fulfilling. But when it lacks meaning, it becomes a source of despair. Because the way he says that human psychology works is that if you have a problem, if you have no problems and no suffering, you're going to be bored. Life is not interesting. But if you then have a problem that's so big and you cannot solve it, you're going to get depressed, right? Um, and of course, when he talks about suffering, he's not talking about like I have stage 4 colon cancer because there's a high chance you're gonna die and there's no way you can really fix it unless you go to chemo, and even then you probably chances are you're gonna die, right?
Right.
Right.
Unfortunately.
But again, those are the extremes, right? So so he says that happiness is not a finish line. Happiness is not a formula. There's no way to figure that out because you're never going to get 100% happiness. It's just never going to happen, no matter what your mindset is, what your religion is, who you are, if you're rich or you're poor, right? It's it's about the journey, as you mentioned earlier, the journey to getting there, right? Because then he also mentions, and you could probably agree with me, human psychology shows us that, for example, if there was a goal and you accomplished it, okay, you're happy temporarily and you feel good, but then it goes away because it's done. You're done
Yeah.
with that. So, right. And then when there's something that you don't have or something you want, it motivates you. Like, I want to get that. I want to be that person. I want to write that. I want to produce this. I want to start this, right? And he says, human psychology, we're always going to be in this loop. We finish something, we're happy temporarily, and then we go down. Life is ups and downs, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that's just how we are humans are wired. Why do you think humanity has advanced so much? Right? We've created, we've gone to the moon, right? We've made movies with sound, right? Science and technology with medicine and robots, everything. Why do you think everything keeps advancing? Because humans, we're never happy with what we have. We
We
always want
pursue more.
more.
Yeah. Hmm.
See or no, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been proven since the beginning of time. We kingdoms wanted to conquer more land and would fight wars to be able to, you know, show your power and take over other people and kill others. And until this day, we continue to do that, right? We want to seek more. We want to get better. We've been able to I believe send something to Mars already at this point. We've been able to land at the moon,
Correct.
like you mentioned. We're just continuing to find out more and more, and that's just part of the human nature in us.
Correct. So if we have this in mind, we can change our perspectives. And
Right.
something that I wrote here is that he actually wrote in the book, suffering is biologically useful. It is nature's agent for inspiring change. Now, this can
Yeah.
apply physically, obviously. This can apply to physical suffering. Like if you hit your big toe against the chair or you touch fire, you're like, oh, I know not to do that now, right? But
Yeah.
he's also talking about emotional or like even internal suffering, right? Where that suffering pushes us to change and like, ooh, I know how this is, or like, I know the process now, right? So he says actually to shift your perspective from chasing happiness to embracing meaningful struggles. Again, you want to change your perspective from finding happiness, la 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 la, to embracing meaningful struggles or meaningful suffering. What am I willing to suffer for? And then he says, for example, what you want to do is you want to identify your values,
Mhm.
redefine success, and then accept the journey, because at the end of the day your struggle is going to determine your success. It's like it's
Very
like
true.
because at the end of the day, if you figure out, okay, these are my values, I
Yeah.
want to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, I know it's going to be hard. I know it's going to be hard, right? But guess what? When you're in that journey, it's all about solving problems. Because as I mentioned earlier, human psychology, we like and we need problems, even though you want to admit it or not. We like problems. And if you can solve them, it brings happiness because you
Yeah.
overcame an obstacle. Do you know what I mean?
That's what life would be boring without problems.
Correct. And the 100% true. And that's why I read this book a long time ago called God and Evil,
Mhm.
where the author, this Jewish author, talks about why we humans suffer. Now, of course, this is a very complex question. I'm not going to get into it, but
Yeah,
one of the
no.
things he does talk about is what you just said. If we didn't have problems, and he's looking at the story of Adam and Eve and so forth, right? But he basically says if Eve didn't eat from the tree and Adam either, then we wouldn't be imperfect and we would be living in a utopia, paradise, quote
Right,
unquote,
right.
and everything would be nice, but we would have no problems, so we wouldn't grow and it would be boring, right? Now, of course, there's a lot more, but I just wanted to mention that. But as you said, so you have to ask yourself, what are my values? Redefine success and then go on the journey, right? And for example, because I think that the last thing I'll mention about this is
Yes.
once you solve one problem, it creates more problems, right? Like for example, if you're weak muscle wise, you're like, all right, I'm gonna join the gym so I can start to work out. Great, you're starting to resolve that problem, but guess what? Now you have more problems. Like maybe you have to get up early in the morning to go work out. Now you have to sweat it out and you have to figure
You
out
have to
what
have a diet.
exercises. Correct. All this stuff. So you solve one problem, but then more problems evolve. But that's fine if you change your perspective of I'm trying to find happiness to like now what do I want? What's the journey? And what am I willing to suffer for to get that result? It's all about the journey. So yeah,
No, yeah, it's what needs to get done for this to work, basically. Um,
correct.
and the more successful you want to be, the more suffering. Well, that's subjective, but the more successful you want to be, the more sacrifice you're gonna have to do. Right, and the faster success you want to have, the more even sacrifice you're gonna have to do. Right. Um, that reminds me a little bit of usually when you have a lot of problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
We acknowledge there's good problems and bad problems.
Of course.
But when you have these problems and you're going through that phase, right? How much you're willing to suffer to accomplish that happiness that you want, that journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to make sure you never, ever, and you mentioned this as well, you never get into that blame game type mentality, into that
Mm-hmm.
victim type of mentality, right? If you want to be able to perform and reach your goal, you have to take accountability for your losses as well. You have
Mm.
to can't find other people or other things to blame on when things don't go your way, when things go wrong. Um, because well, I believe we discussed this in other podcasts. I believe one of the best mental ways to live by is that everything is like kind of your fault. You
Mm-hmm.
know, therefore you take always full accountability and you avoid that type of mentality of always trying to victimize yourself.
Mm.
Why I haven't gotten here? Why haven't I reached this? Oh yeah, life.
Yeah, life, yeah.
What the fuck does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That could mean so many different things, but that tends to be like our excuse, right? And that's just a very small portion of what a victim mentality is. We get into like the the nitty and gritty, but I believe what would apply to most people is it's literally that like that quote where like, oh, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? Or like, what's limiting you? Or life. And it's like, okay, so where's the accountability?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, life has brought this, life has brought that. Good or bad problems, you learn how to deal with it, you move on. But saying that expression, life, cannot, I believe it's just a step closer to much more of a victim mentality. And blaming something that, in a sense, it's anonymous. It's we don't know what it is, but it's something that happened in your life,
Mm-hmm.
but and which is the reason why you haven't been able to reach the goal you've wanted to.
Mm. No, 100%. You're right. We have to be careful with victim mentality and also denial. When you're in denial of what's happening, but you kind of
Right.
mentioned it, but you didn't really mention the word denial. But yeah, I would
Okay.
say those are the two ways that people sabotage sabotage themselves. The victim mentality, blaming others or their circumstances. Which listen, sometimes you do have difficult circumstances, or you're in denial, which means you're not really acknowledging that your problems exist. You're like, oh, that's not really a problem, right? And the commonality between denial and victim mentality is that they both lead to short-term relief. They both lead to short-term relief, but at the end, the long term, the person ends up angry and they're not happy and relentless and they get crazy because they went for the short-term relief, either in denial or victim mentality, but the long term, they're really gonna feel it. And um and I think
Int-
from and I think from that point, the last thing, I mean, the second mindset that I'll mention
Okay.
is about chasing superficial goals using crappy values and poor metrics. That's another very toxic mindset that I think I used to have at some point, and I think I've met a lot of people who who've had this, where they're chasing a superficial goal. Like the book mentions something. There's a key quote that I'll read. It says, "When you measure yourself by shallow values or superficial goals, you choose a crappy reality for yourself, regardless of how great things are going." So, for example, superficial goals can be like likes for a video, popularity, fame, even wealth, right? Even wealth can be that, right? That's why when I talk about wealth, I always say if you're trying to be wealthy, but then add a purpose to it. I want to be wealthy because I want to build a building, I want to build a building for all the poor kids that have malaria,
Yeah, I want to give to
whatever, and
charity. Yeah.
in Kenya. But yeah, but the more specific, the better. But he says in the book, a lot of these are superficial goals. They're not bad, but if that is the ultimate, it's a superficial goal. And then not only is the goal crappy and too shallow, and there's no depth into it,
Hmm.
right? But the reason you're going for those goals is because your value is so shitty, it's so crappy, right? And the way you measure yourself, if you're successful or not, the way you're measuring is very inadequate. It's not a good way. So, for example, a lot of these superficial goals, they lead to unhappiness because it all depends on an external factor. And this is what he's saying. If your goal depends on an external factor, something that you don't have control over, like people's opinions, maybe certain achievements, certain
Hmm.
prizes, if that is how you're measuring yourself, it's not going to go well for you because you don't really have control over those things, right? Um, and he talks about like chasing likes and followers on social media, buying the latest BMW because you want to be seen as rich and the coolest, right? In Manhattan or Brooklyn, right? Or if you are pursuing a career just because it can give you honor and fame, but not because you love it or you like it. So you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Now, he also mentions I want to read something. I thought that there was some great ones, right? So, for example, he wrote that the reason why a lot of times shallow goals are toxic is because they're really empty, but most importantly, they're externally focused. As I already mentioned before, you don't really
Hmm.
have control, so everything's externally focused. And when everything is externally focused, guess what? Your happiness is like on a little string. It's very fragile. And it'll only be temporary because you don't have control and you're giving your control to an outside factor. That's why. And then it becomes this endless cycle, ups and downs, right? Because once you achieve a superficial goal, then you got to reach another one, and it just goes like that.
Hmm.
Um, he also mentions how you need to replace your shallow value with a deeper one, like something intrinsic. Instead of looking at something extrinsic or external, look at something an intrinsic value that you align yourself with, like maybe honesty or compassion,
Right, right.
or creativity, integrity, self-respect. So when you focus on an internal value, and again, I'm just trying to remember everything he said. When you focus on an internal value, he says, your happiness becomes more stable, quote unquote, more stable. Your happiness, quote unquote, becomes more stable because you're not dependent on something external. It's in you. You're dependent on an internal factor, right? Now, of course, it doesn't mean external factors are all bad, but that's the ultimate. Again, that is the worst thing you can do. And in conclusion, what he says, You need to self-reflect. Ask yourself, what are my values? Are they meaningful or not? Right? Then you have to reframe your success. Now, what does that mean? So you have to ask yourself, what do I want? What do I truly value? So you take your
Mhm.
values, what do I truly value? And then focus on how your goals can contribute to your growth in your career, in your personal life, and so forth. And then just practice gratitude. This is what he says. But again, in conclusion, if that's all you're thinking of is the external goal, the external value, and the way you measure yourself, you're like, hey, listen, I want to be rich like this person. And oh man, my video didn't get 28 million views like this person. That sucks. I'm not as successful. You, your values are crappy. The goal is crappy. The way you're measuring yourself is also crappy. Everything is crappy, and you're never happy. And then you become this endless cycle, this feedback of hell, as they call it. So yeah.
I really like that point. It reminded me of just like a typical example of you want to be in a sense in love with the inner and not the outer. And
Correct.
what I mean by that is like you as a guy or anyone who's watching this podcast, you could say I love you to somebody,
Hmm.
right? But do you mean it superficially? Are you actually in love? Or do you actually mean it internally versus somebody, right? You could look at a girl and be like, oh, she got this, her pretty face, she got a nice body, you know, but that's just superficial type love.
Hmm.
That's not gonna last, right? You're just gonna, yeah, I love this girl because she looks like this, she looks like that. But how does she treat you?
Hmm.
Or what characteristics, what traits does she have that makes you fall in love with her? What
Hmm.
makes you want to be around her in a sense, right? So that's why it just reminded me of that. Be instead of being shallow, go more into depth. And you also mentioned a very interesting thing that I just want to connect to my one of my last points,
Yeah, yeah,
which is
go, go.
you said practice gratitude.
Yes.
Why? And then I'll go on to my thing quickly.
Oh, was that a question?
Yeah.
So wait, why we should practice gratitude?
Why for that type of mindset? And then I'll
Why
just link it to mine. Yeah.
why do you need gratitude, or why you should practice gratitude for this second mindset that I was talking about?
Yeah.
Because the whole point of gratitude is you're thankful for what you have up until this point, right? That's really what it's about. It's about the steps, the progress. Um, well, first of all, you have to be thankful for it, because when you do those steps, not only you're learning the process, but you take a lot from it. But also, when you do it again, right, the learning curve has increased, which means you can do it much quicker now, right? And if you don't stop for a second and think of all the things you've done so far, you're always going to be in this mindset of like critiquing yourself. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a great thing. But if you're always critiquing yourself and you never stop and say, hey, listen, I've actually done all this stuff, I'm very proud of myself, right? First of all, you're not practicing gratitude, but you're going to forget about all the great stuff you've done actually, and how you've impacted the world or your community, or whomever. And it's good to bask in that. It's good to like get involved and be like, oh, I actually did this and it helped this person. I feel so good. And sometimes it can even give you a different perspective if you should continue or not, yes or no, and why, or why not. So I think that's why you should practice gratitude.
And and that's good that you mentioned that side of gratitude because I just wanted to speak a little bit on the other side of gratitude, which is entitlement, right?
Okay, go.
You're yeah, you talked about how you can't just be so critical. I mean, it's good, but you have to also acknowledge the progress that you've been able to do.
Correct.
But at the same time, you can't overdo it and then have this sense of entitlement, this belief that you deserve things without putting the effort type mindset, right? Because at the end of the day, when you believe you have the right to everything, you don't value anything.
Hmm.
So yeah, I believe that I believe of all of these mindsets that we spoke about today. Um, Sometimes you have to be able to overcome it, you have to focus on the things you can control. Therefore, these toxic mindsets don't ever hinder your success.